All right, so are you ready to dive into another true crime case?
Always. What do you have for us this time?
Well, this one comes from the 48 Hours channel, and it's all about this guy named Scott Kimble, also known as Hannibal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Hannibal. I remember this case. It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, it is. So it's about this guy, Scott Kimble. He was a convicted con artist.
Right.
But here's the twist. He was working as an FBI informant at the same time.
Whoa, wait a minute. So he's a known criminal working with the FBI? That's a conflict of interest right there.
Exactly. And get this, he ends up getting linked to the disappearances of 4 people.
No way. So they think he might have been committing crimes while working with the FBI.
That's the big question. This deep dive is going to be all about trying to untangle that.
Sounds complicated.
Oh, it is. The episode goes through each of the 4 people who disappeared and how they were connected to Kimball.
Okay, so who are they?
We've got Leanne Emmy, Jennifer Markham, Casey McLeod, and even Kimball's own uncle, Terry Kimball.
so like family, friends, acquaintances. What kind of time frame are we talking about here?
They all vanished over a period of several years, which just adds to the mystery, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be incredibly frustrating for the families not knowing what happened.
Absolutely. And the episode actually talks about the struggles those families faced. Like with Leanne and Casey, their families were initially told they couldn't even file missing persons reports
Seriously, why not?
because there wasn't enough evidence of foul play right away. The police were like, hold on, they might just be missing, not necessarily victims.
It's like that saying, missing, presumed bored.
Yeah.
That's got to be maddening for the loved ones left behind.
It is, and the episode really highlights the frustration they felt dealing with law enforcement. It took a long time for things to start moving.
So let's get back to this Scott Kimble, a.k.a. Hannibal. What was he like? The episode must paint some kind of picture of him, right?
Oh, definitely. He comes across as this super charming guy, like really charismatic, smooth talker, the kind of person you might not suspect at first glance.
Oh, so the classic charming con man type.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many people he fooled over the years.
Right. The episode talks about his long history of con artistry. He was apparently really good at it.
Which makes his potential involvement in these disappearances even more chilling, right? You think, how could someone who seems so trustworthy be capable of something so dark?
Exactly. And what's even crazier is how he was connected to all 4 of these people. I mean, married to Casey's mother.
Whoa, hold on. So he was married to the mother of one of the missing people.
Yep. Then there's Jennifer. He knew her through her boyfriend who was in prison with him.
What a tangled web. And how about Leanne Emmy? How did he know her?
They met through another inmate. Can you believe that?
Wow, this guy really knew how to work the system, didn't he? And then, of course, there's his uncle, Terry.
Right, Terry Kimball. So it's like this whole web of relationships, and then poof, they all vanish.
Makes you wonder if he was intentionally targeting vulnerable people, right?
Yes.
Maybe folks he thought he could manipulate or control.
That's what's so unsettling about it. And then the whole FBI informant thing just adds this whole other layer of complexity, right?
Yeah, it's like, how much did the FBI know about his activities? And could they have potentially intervened sooner? We've got to talk about that.
Oh, we will. The episode really gets into that whole aspect later on. But first, it focuses on the suspicions that started to grow around Kimball, especially from Casey's mother, Lori, and Jennifer's father, Bob.
Makes sense. They were probably desperate for answers, and I bet they suspected him all along.
They did, and they really had to push to get law enforcement to take them seriously.
Oh, I bet. That's got to be so frustrating for families, knowing in your gut something's wrong, but hitting a brick wall with the authorities.
It is. The episode talks about how Jennifer's father, Bob Markham, he actually put up a billboard about his daughter's case.
A billboard? Wow, that's dedication right there. What happened? Did it lead to anything?
Well, it's actually how he connected with Casey's father, Rob.
No way. So 2 of the families connected through a missing person billboard. That's incredible.
I know, right? And they joined forces to put pressure on the FBI to launch a serious investigation.
It's amazing what people can do when they come together, especially when they're driven by such a powerful force, like finding their missing loved ones.
Right. Their determination really helped to push the investigation forward. But investigating Scott Kimble, it was no easy task.
Yeah, I bet. A con man like that probably knows all the tricks to stay ahead of the law.
Exactly. The episode introduces us to Detective Gary Thatcher and Special Agent Jonathan Grusing.
They were the lead investigators.
They were, and let me tell you, they had their work cut out for them.
So what were the biggest obstacles they faced? Spill the tea.
Well, for one thing, Kimble was a master manipulator, super good at lying, throwing people off his trail.
That's not surprising, considering his history. But what about physical evidence? Did they have anything concrete to tie him to the disappearances?
That was another challenge. Initially, there were no bodies. It was all circumstantial.
So how did they even start to piece together a case against him?
Well, they had to be really meticulous, following every lead, checking every alibi. And then there was this whole web of lies he'd created. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, trying to get to the truth.
Sounds like a real headache for those investigators. They must have really had to dig deep to crack this case.
They did. And there's this one detail from the episode that I found particularly interesting. So Kimble actually tried to throw investigators off the scent with this elaborate story about his Uncle Terry.
Wait, Terry, the uncle who disappeared, what did he say happened to him?
He claimed that Terry had won the lottery and run off to Mexico with a stripper.
Oh, come on, that's so cliche, even for a con man.
I know, right? But it just shows how cunning he was, how quickly he could spin a tale to deflect suspicion.
So did the investigators buy it.
Not for a second. They quickly debunked his story.
Good for them. But if they knew he was lying, why couldn't they arrest him right then and there?
It wasn't that simple. Remember, at that point, they still didn't have any concrete evidence linking him to the disappearances.
Okay, I get it. No bodies, no proof, just a lot of suspicion and a skilled liar.
Right. But then everything changed when they finally discovered Casey's remains.
Oh, wow. So they finally found a body. Where was she?
I don't want to spoil all the details, but let's just say it was a pretty grim discovery. And it immediately shifted the whole investigation from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation.
That's a huge turning point. So with a body found, did they finally have enough to arrest Kimble?
Yes, this was the break they needed. Finding Casey's remains meant they were dealing with an official homicide, and the heat was on.
Makes you wonder, did the discovery of the body rattle Kimble at all? Did he finally confess or give up any information?
That's what we're going to dive into next. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense.
It's crazy, right? Like he was using his role as an FBI informant
Right.
as a way to cover up his other activities.
Yeah, it's like a total double life. He was playing both sides.
And doing a pretty good job of it too, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
he fooled a lot of people, even the FBI maybe.
That's the scary part. The episode talks about how much trust the FBI placed in him. Knowing what we know now, it just seems so risky.
It definitely was a risky strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a convicted con man.
Exactly. And there's this one part in the episode where they talk about how Agent Sloth, the FBI agent who was working with Kimble, he really believed in him.
Believed in him, as in thought he was actually reformed and trying to help.
Yeah, it seems like he really did trust Kimble. Which is understandable in a way, right? I mean, his job was to cultivate these relationships with informants.
Sure, but it's like, shouldn't there be some kind of red flags going off when the informant is a known con artist with a shady past?
You would think so, right? But it just goes to show how easily someone like Kimble could manipulate people, even experienced law enforcement agents.
It makes you wonder about the whole informant system, doesn't it? Like, how do you balance the need for information with the risk of being played by someone like Kimble?
It's a tough question, and this case really highlights the potential dangers.
Definitely. And let's not forget about the victims in all of this. Those families went through years of not knowing what happened to their loved ones.
That's what really gets to me about this case. Even with Kimble's conviction, there's still so much unanswered.
Especially for Jennifer Markham's family, right? They still don't know what happened to her.
It's just heartbreaking. It shows that even when justice is served, the pain and uncertainty can linger for years and years.
It's a reminder that sometimes closure is hard to come by. So, where do we go from here? We've talked about the investigation, the role of the FBI, the families.
Well, to understand Kimble's motives, I think we need to take a closer look at each victim's connection to him.
Makes sense. By digging into those relationships, we might get some clues about what drove him to do what he did.
Let's start with Leanne Emmy. The episode mentions that she knew Kimble through her boyfriend at the time, Stephen Hawley.
Hawley. He was the prisoner who introduced her to Kimble, right?
He was. They were both in prison together, and Hawley actually warned Leanne's father about Kimble.
Wait, seriously? He knew Kimble was bad news, and he still introduced him to his girlfriend.
It's strange, right? He even told Leanne's dad that Kimble, quote, knew people who would kill you.
Wow, talk about a red flag. It's almost like he knew something bad was going to happen.
And there were these emails that Leanne sent to her cousin talking about how Hannibal, remember that was Kimble's nickname, was protecting her.
Protecting her from what? I'm starting to get a bad feeling about this.
The episode also mentions that Leanne was allegedly laundering money for Kimble.
Ah, so maybe she knew too much about his criminal activities and he had to silence her.
It's possible, especially if she became a liability to him.
Let's move on to Jennifer Markham. How is she connected to Kimble again?
Through her boyfriend, Steve Enos. He was in prison with Kimble.
Right, and Kimble promised to help her find a job after he got out. What a snake.
I know. He even went so far as to fabricate this whole story about Jennifer being involved in a murder-for-hire plot.
Why would he do that?
So he could offer to help the FBI investigate as an informant. It was all just a way to gain their trust and make himself look useful.
Wow, talk about manipulative. He was playing everyone. And sadly, Jennifer is still missing, right?
Yes, her case is the only one that remains unsolved. Her family is still looking for answers.
It's just awful. Let's hope they find some peace eventually. Okay, what about Casey McLeod? I remember her mom was married to Kimble.
Yeah, they were married when Casey disappeared. Can you imagine? Your husband, the person you're supposed to trust the most.
And all this time, he might have been involved in her daughter's disappearance. That's terrifying. Did Lori, Casey's mom, suspect him at all?
Not at first. She really believed he was helping to find Casey.
But there must have been some signs, some red flags along the way, right?
There were. The episode talks about how Kimble claimed to have found Casey's necklace on a doorknob.
Oh, so he was trying to make it look like she ran away.
Exactly. He was planting evidence to mislead investigators.
Such a cold-hearted move. All right, so that leaves us with Terry Kimble, his own uncle. Any theories on why he might have harmed him?
Well, the episode suggests that it was all about money. Terry had come into some money from a divorce and he was carrying a lot of cash around.
So Kimble saw an opportunity and took it. That's just cold.
It really is. And here's the interesting thing. Kimble actually admits to killing Terry.
Wait, what? He confessed to murdering his own uncle. But he's still playing dumb about the women.
Exactly. He calls himself a mechanism in their deaths, but he refuses to give any details.
It's like he's trying to control the narrative, even in his confession. He wants to decide how he's perceived.
It's really bizarre, and it leaves you with this unsettling feeling that we might never know the whole truth.
It's like we've only scratched the surface of this guy's darkness. This whole deep dive has been pretty intense, right?
It has. We've talked about the crimes, the victims, the investigation, the FBI's involvement, but I think there's still more to unpack here.
I agree. There's got to be more to this story. Where should we go next?
I know it's crazy to think that he could just, switch between those different roles so easily.
I think that's what makes him such an effective con man, right? He could adapt to any situation, any person.
You're probably right, yeah. It's almost like he had this, sixth sense, you know?
Yeah.
He could spot a vulnerable person a mile away.
It's like he could sense weakness, desperation, anything he could exploit.
Exactly, and then he'd swoop in with his charm and his promises, offering them exactly what they needed to hear.
And all the while, he was probably already planning his next move.
It's chilling to think about, and the fact that he was able to compartmentalize his life like that, it's just mind-boggling.
It really is. I mean, he was juggling all of these identities, con artist, FBI informant, husband, friend, and he managed to keep them all separate.
You have to wonder, right? Was he born this way, or did something happen that turned him into this?
It's the age-old question, isn't it? Nature versus nurture. What creates a person like Scott Kimble?
It's a question that might never be fully answered, I think. And going back to the FBI's involvement, their trust in him raises some serious red flags, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. This whole case really exposes the potential pitfalls of using informants, especially ones like Kimble.
It makes you wonder if there are enough safeguards in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
I think there needs to be more transparency, more accountability within these agencies.
And definitely more oversight when it comes to managing informants, especially those with a history of deceit like Kimble.
We have to learn from these mistakes, right? We owe it to the victims and their families.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, this case is about Leanne, Jennifer, Casey, and Terry.
Real people with families who loved them and who are still grieving their loss.
And for Jennifer's family, the search for answers continues. They may never know what truly happened to her.
It's a reminder that justice doesn't always bring closure. Sometimes the questions linger, the pain remains.
This deep dive into the Scott Kimble case has been a difficult one, to say the least.
We've seen the dark side of human nature, the manipulation of violence, and the lasting impact it has on those left behind.
It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems we rely on and the people we trust.
It's a reminder to always be vigilant, to question everything, and to never stop seeking the truth.
Thank you for joining us on this journey as we explored the complexities of this case. I hope it has left you with some things to think about.
And I hope it inspires you to keep asking questions and to keep fighting for justice wherever you see the need.
Until next time. Keep diving deep.